Okay, well, we're here. Hi, Justin. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good. So we've got Justin Stinson with us here today. He is, I'm going to let you tell about you, but just a quick introduction. He is a CEO and he has an executive coaching business that I think you said you launched in 2020. But I'll let
Mhm.
you tell a little bit about that and how you got into that. And then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, back in 2020 during the pandemic, I kind of noticed there was just a lot of people struggling to figure out how to do business because you couldn't really do the traditional handshake like we were always used to. And so um, I just kind of jumped into it by accident and just started to help a bunch of different companies to think differently. I have a background in photography. And so I tend to approach business from a very creative and different perspective anyway. And so I figured, hey, maybe I can help some people in this really difficult, weird time. And
Yeah, that makes
so
sense.
over time, it just sort of morphed into a business, and I was able to actually start working with some incredible companies around the entire globe, from just executives at every level of an organization and startup companies that were looking to find new ways to scale, new revenue, work on their um, leadership skills, and building in their culture as they grew.
I love that. I Okay, so that's cool. Well, tell me a little bit about I want to dive in this conversation. I really want to talk about your coaching, your executive coaching
Mhm.
business. So, I own an executive search firm. I run an executive networking group. And so a lot of my network, I would say, is executives. And so I want to provide nuggets, something that could enrich and help, them in their careers, who knows, maybe their lives. But I do want to focus more on that coaching aspect
Mhm.
of your career. But before we do that, share with the world. You mentioned that you earlier today we had a conversation, and you mentioned that you were in transition, looking for your next opportunity. So I would love
Mhm.
for you to take a second and just share what you do and what you're looking for. And who knows, maybe there's someone out there listening that'll be like, "Oh my gosh, that's the guy I'm looking for."
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, I've spent about the last 20 years in leadership positions across the telecommunications world, doing everything from sales and marketing all the way up to CEO level, and just looking to grow companies. That's one of my biggest passions, is to grow and expand companies, take them into new markets, really challenge kind of the status quo from a sales and marketing perspective, and then really just develop the people that are within it, and hopefully grow that company both internally and externally for the customers.
Nice. And you mentioned that you are, um, like you like the mid cap space. So, like,
Hmm.
I mean, you've got experience with small, you've got experience with,
Right.
global organizations, but you really like that kind of mid cap space. So, we talked earlier today, like that, 1 to 500 million. But, if
Yep.
you're under 100 million and you're looking for a CEO who is sales minded, sales driven, revenue driven.
Hmm.
I still think it's worth a conversation after our conversation today. So, I think you've got a lot to offer in that space. So transitioning, thank you for that, by the way. Transitioning over to your executive coaching, how did you like decide like this is what I'm going to do now, or you know,
Yeah. Just kind of weird because I've always just enjoyed that part of my job, is
yeah,
working with my employees and seeing them succeed. I'm really not one for a lot of um, awards or anything like that. I don't really care about that type of stuff, but I really like to watch my people see those accolades.
yeah.
And so over the time, I think it I can really see the advantage to growing your internal staff and helping them develop, because it helps the hiring piece and it helps build that culture that you're trying to build in,
Well, and
for
retention.
long term.
You know,
Right. Retention is
if
huge.
you can fix the retention piece,
Mhm.
the hiring struggle isn't as much of a struggle.
Exactly. Yeah,
So,
because otherwise you kind of get into this I need a warm body type of scenario,
yeah,
and you're hiring for a resume at that point instead of hiring for the culture. And I think that's where a lot of companies end up getting stuck. And
yeah,
then not only are you trying to train this person up, but you may be trying to train them right out of the organization. It not only costs a lot of money, but it can really have a huge impact on your internal culture moving forward. And that's
yeah.
hard to get back.
I agree with that 100%. So when you're sitting down with the CEO and somebody has enlisted your services and they're telling you their woes and their challenges and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I
Mhm.
need help." What are the first 3 questions that you ask of a CEO or whomever, whatever leader level has enlisted your services? What are the first 3 questions that you ask them?
Yeah, the first thing I really like to know is why they got into the business that they're in. Um, why are they doing what they're doing? Did they start the business themselves? Why did they start it? I really want to know that why. After that, I really want to know who they are. So, what does life look like outside of your business world? So, do you like to read a lot of books? Do you like to go hiking? Are you big on travel? That really tells me what motivates you. And you know it really kind of helps understand kind of that global world that this person lives in. Are
Right.
they very focused on the literal aspect, or are they more of the real world experience type of stuff?
I love
And
that
then
you
the
asked
the
that.
yeah. And then the third one is, I just really want to know the biggest challenge that's facing their company today. Not
Yeah.
5 years down the road. We'll get to that down the road, but why am I here?
Yeah.
Obviously there's a challenge going on and I want to help you with it, but what's that biggest challenge?
And
Uh,
what do you think, like, collectively when you're talking to people, what's if you had to pick just one thing, what is the one
mhm.
most common struggle that you hear or challenge that you hear from a CEO or whoever is hiring you?
Yeah, it's always hiring.
Yeah.
Just the staffing aspect, keeping people, finding people, and then keeping them.
Mhm.
Sales staff are always really difficult to
That
find.
that is a high
Uh,
turn environment that I just
yeah,
don't know can always be because you get people in,
right,
you don't even know if they like it, and you gotta go through those growing pains, right?
right,
And then
right.
you get it's like what the Pythagorean what's the is it the 80/20 rule where,
Yeah,
20% are gonna be they're gonna love it, and they're gonna be in it forever, and then you've got
right.
80% that are like, "Y'all do this for a living?"
Yeah. And salespeople are generally good because they are good.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
when you're interviewing them, it's really hard to tell exactly who they are, what you're getting out of them. Are they as good as they actually say? And
yeah,
you really kind of have to dig deeper. And sometimes it's a different conversation than what you normally would have with like a finance person or an engineer, things like that. They're a little more black and white.
yeah, for sure, I get that. What do you think in your own experience as a hiring manager and also working with these, leaders under the hiring umbrella, what do you think is the biggest challenge? Why do you think hiring I have my own opinions, but I'd like to know
Mhm.
yours. Why do you think hiring is such a challenge right now for most organizations?
Yeah. I think they get so lost in the skills that this person may have instead of what they can actually bring to the culture of the organization.
Dang,
So,
man, I wish I had
um,
a little bell I could ring and go ding, 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 ding.
yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny. I always talk about this with folks when I'm working with them. Is a lot of companies say, "Oh, we've got the greatest culture in the world. It's so awesome," but they only talk about it once a month at the all employee meeting. And so, in
Yeah,
my opinion, that is not a culture. That is
right.
just kind of a agenda item.
Yeah,
And so, in my opinion, and the way I manage the cultures with the businesses I work in, is it's a daily conversation. Like if that word culture isn't coming out of your mouth, it is, then you're not living it.
well,
And
and it's
so
more
you,
about don't you think it's more about actions even than words? It's more about
mhm,
how you speak to other people, how you allow other people in your organization to speak to one another, rather
right,
than even just plastering your mission on the wall or your "We're a culture-driven organization, like,
right,
we really covered our culture, and here's what we're doing to make it great." Super, but how is everyone treating each other,
yep, yep.
under the roof? Yeah.
I think there's a lot of confusion about sometimes what culture really is as well. I was having this conversation a couple weeks ago with somebody, and they're like, "Oh, we have a pool table in the basement, and we have a softball team and things like that." And I'm like, "Well, those are really just perks.
Yeah,
You
for
know,
sure.
that's
God
something
bless
to
you
make
for
it fun to
saying
come to
that.
work." But developing people and really focusing on their growth and customer service and just kind of having a light mood at work and being okay to laugh. I think
Yeah.
that's more where the culture really plays in.
I agree 100%, and I really think so for my generation, which I don't know if you're in my generation or you're millennial, I'm not sure, but I'm Gen X, and our generation, we might have cared about a pool table, we might have cared about a fridge stocked full of beer or whatever,
Hmm.
like, yeah, that's freaking cool. But I
Right.
don't think the generations that are coming behind us give a damn. Like, I just don't think they
No.
care. They're like,
No.
"Okay, but I wanna be off at 5 o'clock so that I can go to my son's baseball game, or so I can
Right.
coach my son's baseball team," or I wanna be home for dinner with my family. Where
Hmm.
my generation, like, dinner with family, our dinner was it was late because I
Right.
always worked late at night wait, late, God, I can't work late, say that fast 3 times. I worked late, I got home late, and, I never really thought about how that was impacting my family. Lessons learned, right? And I'm so happy that my own children aren't making those same choices, but
Yeah.
nonetheless, the generations coming behind us, they're just making, I don't wanna call it better choices, but different choices for their families and for themselves. They don't care about the beer in the fridge at the
Right.
office, they don't care about the pool table, they don't care about the
Nope.
foosball, they don't care about frankly, if you tell them, "Listen, here's what I care about, production. I care about
Hmm.
your happiness. I care about you growing within this organization. I care about you being successful, and oh, by the way, I care about you living your life outside of these walls," right?
Yep.
That motivates Gen Z, that motivates the
Yep.
younger end of millennial. Um, I don't know, what are your thoughts on that? Because that's been my experience in leading teams.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, those are kind of playtime sort of, perks. The ones that I've really seen be beneficial are things focused around mental health.
Yes,
Having
huge.
something for like a mental health app or,
Mhm.
books on tape type of thing that people can help grow themselves.
Yeah.
That's kind of really what they're trying to find is that balance within their life so that they can do the things that they really love, whether that's yoga class, whether that's their kids' softball. That's
Yep,
the things that are really important, so help
that's
them
right.
get to that, and that's gonna really drive some interest with your
And
culture.
flexibility with time off, I mean, that's huge. My
Mhm.
team, at my prior firm, I built that team from scratch, and I hired mostly Gen Z and young millennials, not intentionally, it was just that's what the budget would allow. Those were the individuals that were attracted to the roles based on the budget that
Right.
we had. And most of them had zero experience walking in, but the number one thing they wanted and what would retain people on that team was flexibility. The ability to, if you wake up one day and you're just not feeling it, now we can't make habitual situations, but
Right.
once every couple months, somebody wakes up and they're like, I'm not feeling work today. And to be able to
Yep.
call and say, I'm not feeling work today, and it's not somebody with a habitual issue, they love that. They love being
Right.
able to take off a week to go on vacation without somebody saying, "What why? We're busy. That's not gonna work for
Right.
us. Can you reschedule that, or can you not?" You know what I'm saying? It's giving them the
Yep.
flexibility to do them on the outside of, business hours, or
Right.
sometimes on. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that went a long way, and it really helped with tenure, and keep in mind that was a sales organization.
Mhm.
So, a lot of
Yep.
people coming into what is sales again? So retaining
Right.
somebody with a mindset of what is sales, that's in and of itself a
Exactly.
challenge.
Make it a positive experience right out of the
Yeah,
gate. You're more
yeah,
likely to keep them longer. Yeah.
agreed, 100%.
Yep.
Um, what else do you think, from a challenging that's creating these challenges around hiring, for organizations?
Um, I think some of it is lack of experience in the hiring process.
Mhm.
I think a lot of those that are doing it maybe just don't have the background or the experience that you
Interviewing, you
you
mean, like
know.
interviewing skills and that
Right,
kind of thing? Okay.
right. Yeah, they may have the sheet of questions, but how do you dig a little bit deeper to find out who this person really is?
Yeah.
it's so easy to just kind of know what those questions are going to be, but
Right.
dig a little deeper and really become an interviewer instead of just reading that paper. So I think that's one big challenge.
Yeah.
I think the other thing is maybe the organization's not having a clear direction on where they want to go with this position. So, if there's somebody just in position and they don't really know the vision of the CEO or the direction that the company is going, they may be looking for somebody to hire that maybe isn't where that company is going. They're
Yeah.
maybe for today, but maybe not for tomorrow. And so it makes that conversation a little bit different when you're interviewing them.
I agree, and I think even in between those 2 things, so in between finding the right person and understanding the vision, the long-term vision/goal of the organization, in between there is a gray area of
Mhm.
who's training them. And
Right.
do they have time to train them, and do they want to train them? So I have found, I've been doing this for a long time. I told you earlier, close to 17 years. And
Mhm.
I think one of the biggest challenges that I've seen with organizations, they need the help, they need the talent, they hire the right people, but they don't want to pour into those individuals once they join the organization. It's a sink or
Mhm.
swim scenario. And oftentimes, and I'm not saying some people do well in that kind of an environment. Some people are, they're tenacious and they're resourceful and they will figure it out. But by and large,
Right.
I don't think that's the average bear. I think
Right.
most people need some sort of direction. They need
Mhm.
some level of feedback. They need to know that, on a scale of 1 to 10, this, week, this month, I'm at a 5. I wanna be a 10. How do I get there? And these leaders are so busy and they just I don't
Mhm.
think it's intentional. I really don't. I don't think that they just stick them in their, cubicle and say, "Good luck to you. Let us know how
Right.
it's going." I think they're just so busy that they forget
Mhm.
that these people don't have any direction, and guess what happens when you don't have a direction? You
Yeah.
get lost, you fail,
Yep.
like, things don't go well, and they call
Yeah.
me and say, I just don't know, man.
Yeah.
I just don't know." And then of course, I have my own, opinion on that. Well, let's talk about the
Mhm.
training, let's talk about the mentoring, let's talk about, how are they doing in every other aspect, but I think that's the
Right.
missing link is the training.
Yeah. I mean, you can't learn a job from a video, and
No,
so many times you just put them in front of a computer, and for the next week and a half, you're going to be watching videos, and this is your job
it's good luck to
instead of
you.
really putting them firsthand, hands on, and seeing every aspect of the business.
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right. That's a big missing piece.
And I think desk shadowing is something that a lot of organizations should allow. I have, oftentimes you have somebody who accepts an offer and then there's a gap.
Mhm.
Okay, but when can we actually get them started? And so most get them within a couple of weeks and that's fine.
Right.
But sometimes there's a 3 to 4 week gap because there's no one to train. The
Right.
CFO or the controller or I'm in a lot of accounting and finance. And so where the accounting manager is, I just don't have time to train this person. So
Mhm.
let's start them in June, when I'm
Right.
back from my vacation or whatever the scenario may be. And I'm like, man, desk sharing, get them in, get them
Yep.
acclimated to the culture, get them through a 2-day orientation type thing, even a 1 day. But
Mhm.
let them just sit with the team. Let them watch different people do the job they're going to do, or even a different job that's within the organization, because
Right.
it's buying brain cells. I love to say that. I'm like, it's buying brain cells and they're becoming familiar. But it gets them acclimated. And I
Yeah.
think there's
You
something
know,
to be said for shadowing.
yeah, that's actually one thing I really enjoy doing, especially in the smaller companies, is a new hire coming in gets to sit with every department and
Yeah, I
really
love
gets a
that.
full 360-degree view of what that business is. So not only are you putting faces to names and what they do, but you're starting to kind of understand how all the pieces start to fit together and how your
Listen.
job is important to the mission of the company.
And don't you think that's really important for an individual to see or understand how their piece of the puzzle is invaluable and necessary?
Oh yeah.
I think it gives them
Yeah,
a
you're
sense
not just a
of
number at that point.
yeah, it gives them a sense of
Mhm.
engagement. They're like, "Oh my gosh, so those guys can't do their job if I don't do my job. Okay, I get it." I think that really
Right.
does help.
Yeah. Even at
So
even at the leader level, like, with me, you mentioned I really like kind of that mid-tier company.
Yeah.
And that's because I really like making impact. I like to see that impact. I like to know that the decisions I'm making are going to have really a positive or a negative. At this level, you take the good with the bad.
Yeah.
And I love that pressure that comes along with that. Sometimes in the much larger companies, you really don't see that. It's more like throwing a pebble in the ocean, and you just don't see that ripple effect go across the rest of the organization.
Yeah. So how do you if you walk into an organization and you identify like their number one issue is hiring and there's the process is broken, or maybe it's the orientation that's broken, whatever it may be, how do you how do you instruct them? Like how do you coach them into making these changes? Like do you have like a methodology that you follow? I mean, how do you what do you do?
A lot of it is really what's the secret sauce?
Yeah, there you go.
Um, I wish there was a secret sauce, but it really is dependent on the person themselves.
Yeah.
What I often find is a lot of it is just um, it's an organizational aspect. So maybe they're not organized enough to bring on a new hire and train them properly. Maybe
Mhm.
it's a lack of knowledge, or like they're new in their position, so they don't really know what is expected. Sometimes they're just so busy that they have certain numbers to hit, and so
Yeah.
I have to make sure I hit that. So everything else is a little bit more. So a lot of it really comes down to those type of conversations that you're having. You need to make sure that you're having actual productive conversations with those people coming in. You need to make sure that you're not just trying to hire for a warm body. And so
Right.
we go through a lot of those interviewing processes, and oftentimes I've sat on interviews with these people so that I can kind of listen to them and provide feedback from there, and then I'll be part of that interview as well, and I'll ask kind of some of the questions so I can really get a sense of what they're looking at. I spend a lot of time trying to get to know the company itself, so I
Yeah.
can understand really where they're falling down with their hiring practices. And it can be at all different levels of their organization or different positions. It doesn't just have to be sales. I've seen researchers, I've seen engineers, and if you just aren't doing that. The second piece is spending a lot of time on that culture. Like these people need to understand what their culture is in their organization. Otherwise, when they talk about it with the new hire, they're not going to understand what's expected of them in this type of culture. And so we spend a lot of time on that as well.
How do you define culture? Like, if somebody put you on the hot seat, as I am right now, and said, "Define culture," what does it mean to Justin? What does it mean to Justin?
um, I would define culture as that when you walk into a building, um, can you sense, without even seeing a single employee, can you feel that energy in the
Yeah,
building, or do you feel that stress? And I think that's really a definition of the culture. So if there's that energy, that means people are excited about their job. That means they're taking care of the customers the right way. That means the quality of work is above and beyond everybody else. There's laughter in the building, and people are growing in their position, and there's advancement opportunities, whether that is just skill wise or position wise. And so I can walk in the front door and I can tell you almost immediately what that culture is going to be like when I
yeah.
walk in.
How do you protect a culture, in your opinion, that in a high growth environment, so let's talk small, mid-sized organizations that are growing rapidly, um, ha but, they don't have the bandwidth that they need to support the growth that they're experience, and budget is at play. Obviously, they can't just go
Mhm.
hire the 20 people they probably need to make their lives a little easier. So they have what they have. It is what it is. They're in a high growth environment. How do they protect their culture when everyone's working, maybe two, three, they're handling the workload of two
Mhm.
people and everyone's exhausted, everyone's tired, but they believe in the mission.
Yep.
How do you protect that culture?
Yeah, that's a great question. It happens all the time. The key is making it a priority. You'll make whatever is important to you uh, successful. So, like in telecom, obviously the network is extremely important, but you don't if you don't have a good culture that is helping build that network to the highest quality, then your customers on the other end are going to have a terrible experience. And
Yeah.
so culture is the number one most important thing in any organization, in my opinion. It
Yeah.
touches every single aspect of the business. So if you're not spending the appropriate amount of time on the culture, then the rest of it's going to start falling apart. And
Yeah.
that's when you start to see the culture crack and people worry more about, this fire that's burning over here, or I need to finish this project. If you've got an upbeat, positive culture, people are going to work harder. They're going to have more energy to do more work. They're going to be more willing to take on different tasks, or cross departments, or whatever it may be that's required to achieve that mission.
Yeah.
So they may believe in the mission, but if they're not feeling appreciated and excited about what they're doing, they're just kind of doing it maybe at like a 7 on a scale of 10, where if they've got a great culture, they're operating at a 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
And
Well,
that's a
it's really
big
it's
difference in the
about
energy.
yes, and I think it's about employee engagement. And that is
Hmm.
so different per human, right? So
Yep.
what one person needs and feeds their soul and gets them, motivated at work is so opposite to another person, right? One person
Yep.
it might be I just need to be able to sit in my cubicle and not be bothered and do my thing. And I don't make me go to I used to work for a guy that, long time ago, he would come to everyone and say, all right, guys, it's 4 o'clock, shut down. We're going to happy hour. Let's go. Half the team would be like, yeah, I work for the best boss ever.
Right.
And others would be like, yeah, but then I'm not going to get everything done. And then I'm going to be
Hmm.
stressed out. And oh, by the way, if I'm leaving work early, I want to go pick up my kids early from daycare so I can get home at a decent hour to make dinner. Like that would
Right.
make my life so different. So I think
Yeah.
it's employee engagement, but understanding what makes each person tick is very, very different person by person,
Yep.
and knowing that as a leader, and that's hard
So
to do.
yeah. So not that long ago, I ran across a book called The Six Working Genius.
Okay, I've
And
never heard of that one.
it was transformative as far as my leadership perspective, and I thought it was really good. And there's actually a survey type of thing that you can do. It's sort of like one of those personality test things we've all done a million of. But this one is really interesting because it breaks down and tells you what each person's energy and the things in their job that kind of bring them down. And so, for instance, if somebody is, a big thinker, that's when they're in an environment that they can do a lot of big thinking and growth minded, and what's the next big thing. That's where they gain their energy from, and that
Okay.
makes their days fly by almost immediately.
Tell me the
But
name of it
if
again. I'm gonna put it at the bottom so it'll scroll across.
it's the six working geniuses.
At, like, 6, like the number 6?
Yep.
Okay, keep going.
um and so if you're somebody that really isn't somebody that likes to be a cheerleader, for instance, or
Right.
somebody that doesn't really like to focus on the details, they're the big thing. If you're focusing on the details, all of a sudden it's really draining on you, and it makes kind of your day tick by, and it's not something you enjoy doing as much. You may have to do it sometimes, but that's not where you're gaining your energy. And so what that means is, if you understand where everybody's energy is coming from with the type of works that they're doing and the things that may be draining them, you can shift their responsibilities. So maybe somebody's kind of like a cheerleader, and that's where they gain it. Great.
Got it.
You are now running the team meetings, or you're running the all employee meetings, because that's where you really get a lot of your energy and you love it. And so
Okay.
that's a growth opportunity. It's an advancement opportunity. It gives you more things you want to do, and it is probably more efficient and productive than somebody that kind of gets drained from that sort of thing.
You have to look at how I spelled genius. I just noticed that. Y'all, when I type without my glasses on, I'm not even gonna say it for those that are listening to the podcast and not looking. You'll have to go watch it because 'cause I'm not gonna confess my sins.
It's
Well, I'll
close.
confess them, I'm just not gonna show you.
It
That's
has the
hilarious.
right letters in it.
Yeah, yeah, not in the right order. So that's
Yeah.
hilarious. That sounds awesome. I actually read a lot, and I have
Mhm.
not heard of that one, so I will definitely I'll get it for sure. Since I launched my own business, I don't read hardly ever anymore. Like, now
Right.
I probably need to read more than I ever did, and
Yeah.
I just don't have time. So, I
Yeah.
love that. Well, that's awesome, and I would agree with that because you were mentioning, like, somebody like, there are people who are people, and they
Mhm.
love being around people, they love talking, they love small talk, they love all of that, and then there's the others who will do it,
Right.
but at the end of the day, they're just done, and
Yep.
it drains them, and they're like, "I just need to not talk to another human for at
Right.
least 24 hours."
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who are you? Of Are you the more, talk, 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 recharge, or I just the guy who can, like, be on all the time?
No, I'm definitely not the one that can be on all the time.
Yeah. Mm.
Like in my working life, I can be on as long as I need to be, and I love the interaction, I love the networking and all that type of stuff. But when I get
Yep.
home, if I can go sit by a lake and just stare at the water, that's even better. And
Yes.
it's just silence around me.
I am exactly the same. I'll do all of the networking. I talk to people. I mean, I'm an executive recruiter. I talk to people all
Hmm.
day long. And I can do it for 10, even sometimes 12 hours a day.
Yeah.
But man, when I travel, I want to go somewhere they don't have a TV. I love to
Right.
drive where I'm going because I don't want the
Yep.
radio on. I just want complete and utter silence. And I like to travel alone, even sometimes because of that. I just want to be in silence, and I want to
Yep.
be still, and I love that.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, any other, tips that you would have for executives that are struggling, with hiring and, retention, obviously? I've got a couple of things that I'll leave us with, but I'd love to hear from you if you've got any other suggestions.
Yeah, I guess the other thing, I guess, even outside of just the hiring aspect, is from a leadership perspective. I think creativity is a really important piece,
Yeah,
and I don't think it gets used enough. And a lot of people just don't come from a background that allows that, or they have that comfortability with it.
right.
You know, my entire life is based around creativity. Every aspect of my business, I'm looking at something from a different perspective, and what that's allowed me to do over time is kind of get some competitive advantages, because while everybody's looking down this one path, I'm looking down a different path and maybe finding some new opportunities. And so really opening up your mind and being creative and letting creativity in, I think can really be uh, a big game changer. And I
Mhm.
think a lot of times people hear creativity and they're like, oh, an artist has paint all over the place and it's unorganized and there's no
Right.
strategy to it. When it's actually just the opposite, because when you look at the final details of any of the art that's created by somebody, there's more details in something that's created in an artistic fashion than almost any other situation in the world. And so while it may look like chaos to the outside world, there's probably more efficiency and focus in that world than most anybody understands. And so allowing that creativity to come in and find those new opportunities, I think can really be a game changer for a business as well.
I think that's the key too. Outside of I've got a couple of things that I will mention that I think if you're not doing as an organization and you have a high, turnover, I've got some things that might help, but that is huge what you just mentioned. And I think it really comes down to giving people a voice, allowing their ideas to be heard because you just don't know the innovation and the creativity and the genius that comes from the guys that, they're not in leadership roles. They're the ones on the front lines. They're the ones talking to the clients every day. They're the ones, behind the scenes and they're in it, right? They're in the weeds. And so they have good ideas on how to make things more efficient or better or whatever. And I
100%.
and I
Hmm.
just don't think we do a great job as leaders remembering that they have
Right.
great ideas too. Um, you had mentioned earlier today when we spoke about you have a photography background and you
Hmm.
have a sort of an analogy from that creative side of you as it relates to an organization. I don't know that we really talked about that on this podcast. I don't think we dove into that. I'd love to
Not too much.
hear. Yeah, I'd just love to hear like your correlation or how your what your analogy is and how it relates to like from the creative world, from the photography world, and an organization.
Yeah, I think anytime I look at business, it's just from a very different perspective. And one of those examples is if I am, taking pictures of the Eiffel Tower, everybody steps back and they take a picture of the Eiffel Tower. You can go on Google Images and see the same picture with maybe a different background, different time of day, but it's the same
Right.
picture a million times over.
Yeah.
So if I'm taking a picture, I'm going to climb up underneath and I'm going to focus on some of the other details of it. Where is it rusting? What are the you know areas that it's connected, or the angles of all of the steel, and really change that look and feel of
Yeah.
what we're looking at. And so I do the same thing when I go into business, is I change everything from it and look at everything from a different perspective. I'm somebody that, even in my normal life, I really like to get up high. I live in Iowa, so there's not always a lot of that.
You're pretty
um,
flat, pretty flat.
yeah, but if I can get up high above the world, the air is different up there. You can kind of see everything just on a more global view. You can see out further, and it allows me to just think a lot clearer than as if you're getting down into the weeds.
Yeah.
And so when you're looking at business from that same perspective, you have to be able to look at things from a different angle, and hopefully solve those problems or find new opportunities coming out of it.
Right. Thank you for that. I think that's awesome. We mentioned that earlier today, and I thought, God, I love that. That's a great analogy. And a couple of other things that I'll add to that is, the world, the employment scene is very different right now than it's ever
Mhm.
been before. And I think that's largely due, obviously, to COVID. It's kind of a bad word now, but I mean, not that it was ever a good word, but it really, I think it gifted us a few things, and then I think it changed things that are never going to go back to the way that they were. One of the
Mhm.
things I love that it gave us is this right here. Like, we are sitting here, on you're in Iowa. I'm not saying we didn't have the capability before. We had the technology, we could do it. We just didn't as much. And
Mhm.
now it's just normal. It's no big thing. And I love that so much. I think it also opened us up to the fact that our leaders, our employees, the people that we work with and for are real humans, right?
Yep.
During COVID, we saw people's cats walking across the keyboard and, kids popping in, because you're like, oh, I'm on a meeting. We just saw
Right.
sides to each other that we had not seen before, So
Mhm.
I love that. And I think that was a gift that we were given. But it changed the employment market because what it did was it created an impasse in my mind
Yep.
with employers, organizations, and employees. Employees are saying, we now know what it feels like to have flexibility. We now know what it feels like to be available, to not, sit an hour in traffic and then rush to the daycare before it
Mhm.
closes at 6, 6:30, whatever the time is, and then rush home and get, I'm thinking from a parental perspective because that was my life, 20 years ago, and I just
Yep.
remember how crazy it was and I don't even know how I survived. I really don't. And I know there's a lot of people out there, moms and dads going, yeah, I don't know how I did it either. But
Right.
we did, right? We survived. But now COVID showed us it doesn't have to be so chaotic.
Right.
There's options, right? We just have to find them and hold out until we find them. And that's the challenge because organizations are saying, "Nope, everybody back in the office." And you've got
Right.
the other side of it that are saying, "Yeah, but we know what it's like to not be back in the office." And so I am in the market. I will talk about a new opportunity, but I'm not going to go to a fully in office position. Now, that's not
Right.
everybody, right? It's not
Yep.
everybody. I would say it's probably 60% of people
Yep.
that are only going to listen to a hybrid opportunity. Meanwhile, you've got a lot of organizations, at least here in DFW, that are going back to a fully in office model, and they
Mhm.
sit there and they're baffled by the talent that's available to them, and they think, well, nobody wants to work. That's not true.
Right.
People do want to work. People are still very much wanting to have meaning and purpose and value, and they have mortgages still, right? Those didn't go away. People still want to work. They just want
Yep.
both. They want the balance. And I
Yeah.
don't want to use the whole phrase work life balance, but that's kind of what it is.
A lot of what it
They
is. Yep.
It is a lot of what it is. And I think if organizations would stick with that hybrid model, even if it's just 2 days,
Yep.
at home, if it's just 2 remote days. And I know there's a
Right.
lot of organizations like, manufacturing plants and things like that. It's not possible. I
Yep.
get that. I get that. I
Right.
understand. But if it's a possibility and you want to attract top talent, you want to attract the hard to find people. Don't narrow your candidate pool down so significantly that, most aren't even going to listen to the role. So that would
Yeah.
be my number one thing is, and you could, from a budget perspective, we're finding if an organization will offer like that 3 day a week kind of hybrid thing, they can actually pay at market, sometimes even a tick below, and still find talented people because they're searching for that.
Right.
Organizations that are fully in office, buckle up. You better be ready to pay significantly above market if you're going to
Yep.
attract top talent. And I'm not talking about leadership roles. I'm not talking
Yeah.
about, managers and above. Those guys are typically open to a fully in office model. If they have to do it, they will. I'm
Right.
talking about your ground level people that are getting like, you can't do business without these people. Um,
Right.
they're they're not even and we just I had a podcast with my partner last week that we did, and this very thing came up. This is what people ask us. They say, because we say the client is fully in office, but they're gonna pay more. Do you know what we hear? I
Right.
mean, more often than not, we hear, "Oh, so you want me to trade my family life for money?" And I'm like, "I
Yeah.
don't know. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying
Yeah.
they're
That's
offering more."
strong.
Yeah. So
Yeah. I think one of the challenges for a lot of companies has just been that trust in employees. Being able to
yeah.
trust that if they're at home, they're actually doing 40 hours worth of work
Yep.
and it's being effective. And so I think that comes back to the hiring piece is
Hmm.
are you hiring people that you can trust and have you built a culture to be able to allow those people to do what
Right.
they need to and still get the work done?
Yeah.
Um,
People
yeah,
still want to do a good job. They
yeah,
still want to be valued. They still want their boss to say, "Great job, Justin,
right.
great job." So that goes back to culture, doesn't it? It goes
Yep,
back
it
to
does.
them knowing that you appreciate them and you value what they're doing. And even if they make a mistake, you're like, "Okay, listen, let's not do that again. Let's sit down and
Right,
talk about that." So, but listen, we're here for you. We got you. Um, let's see what we can do better next time. I think it all
right.
comes down to culture, like you were saying earlier,
Mhm.
and employee engagement. Because if people are engaged and they value their organization and they value their leaders, they want to do a good job for those people.
Right,
It's
right,
when they don't feel valued, then they don't really care. They're at home just,
right.
biding time. And no, we
Yeah,
don't want our employees just biding time.
yeah. Almost
Yeah.
nobody comes to work, wakes up in the morning and comes to work and says, "I'm gonna do a terrible job today." Nobody
Nobody.
ever really does that. So, you
Nobody.
need
Well,
to
I
give
shouldn't say
people the benefit
nobody,
of the
but
doubt.
we
Right.
really
The ones that
do.
are wanting to get fired.
Yeah, exactly, and I've had those too. Those are always fun. But for the
Right.
most part, I think people wanna do a good job, and I think they
They
wanna
do.
feel valued, and they will value the organization, the job, and the leaders if they feel valued. So it
Right,
really does come
right.
down to that. Well, thanks
100%.
for your time today.
Thank you.
I really
I had fun.
appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just I want to make sure everybody does understand real quick again that Justin is looking for his next opportunity. You just ended your prior engagement or role as a
Mhm.
CEO just like now, like recently,
Yeah,
right?
very
Um,
recently, yep.
yeah, so he lives in Iowa right now, but he is open to relocation, not an ideal scenario, but we'll definitely have the discussion if the role makes sense for him.
Definitely.
He is just a quick, brief overview CEO, telecommunications, but really interested in the SaaS industry. Would love to
Mhm.
have a conversation about that. And like we mentioned earlier, you've got small company and you've got global organizations. So you've
Yep.
got an incredibly vast experience and knowledge. So if you want to get in touch with Justin, just call me. I will make a connection for you guys to have a conversation. Or he is on LinkedIn, so you could just reach
Yep.
out directly on LinkedIn.
Absolutely.
So
That'd be great.
yeah, and just us, we're an executive search firm. If you're listening and you've not heard of us, we're the executive movement. We place C-level talent in accounting and finance from senior accountant, senior analyst to CFO. I've been doing this for 17 years. And if you're in the DFW area and you are an executive, we have a networking group, the executive movement networking in Frisco, Texas, the second Friday of every month. So there's that. Thanks so
Awesome.
much. Have a wonderful, wonderful afternoon. And I appreciate your time so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.